Alright class, it's time for your 5th race inspection and... Oh, you're not supposed to be here. Care to explain? So now that we've had the flyaway races of the season all done and dusted and we're about to enter the European season of events before we then move to Montreal for some reason, I wish to discuss the 5 drivers that have impressed me the most and the ones that have really disappointed me. You may not agree with some of the entries on this list, but it's all to do with relation to the team that they are in. The one that impressed me at number 5 was Oscar Piastri. Now you might be wondering, why is a McLaren driver on our top 5 list? Well, simply put, it's all to do with the expectations that we put on the lad at the beginning of the season and even before that. Everyone was expecting Oscar Piastri to be able to come out of the gate and do better or similar to what Ricciardo was doing last year and give Lando Norris a bit of a fright. Don't forget Jeddah, where he qualified in Q3 and got in P8. He was in the top 10 in a car that really does not deserve to be there right now. So there are actual glimmers of hope that Oscar Piastri is able to hit the ground running in a car which is really in the doldrums right now. Can you imagine what he'd be doing in a car which is meant to be the best of the rest? Piastri should be troubling for very solid points, including Norris. Norris and Piastri on their day could be a very formidable lineup. It's just a shame that the car is letting them down. Oscar Piastri has impressed me quite a bit. He's been able to do what everyone expected him to do. Okay, this is where it's going to get a little bit spicy. 5th worst, Charles Leclerc. Like I said, in relation to the team that they are in and what is expected of them, Charles Leclerc has a lot of expectations. Him being the golden boy of Ferrari, he is meant to be the person that is meant to give Max Verstappen the challenge of a world title bid. Yes, of course, Ferrari is in an absolute state right now, and Carlos Sainz is having to do the best to try and pick up the pieces of the team and salvage something that gets them into P3 in the Constructors. But really, there's a lot of pressure on Charles' shoulders. He's just not really delivering what is expected. Up until the 4th race of the season, he only had 6 points to his name. He's been making some really weird mistakes that are very unbecoming for the number 1 Ferrari driver. Then in Miami, he had the issue where he spun off in qualifying, ending up in 7th, and then basically struggling with Magnussen for the majority of the race. There's just really not that spark I'm seeing, and he's struggling. And let's not forget, his contract is up at the end of next year. Where is he gonna go? Might Ferrari give him the boot and maybe replace him with somebody else? Ollie Behrman from Formula 2 perhaps? But I really hope getting into the European season that he does pick up the pace. I don't want him to be on this list. Ideally on the top list, which is where Yuki Tsunoda at number 4 is. As I've mentioned in previous videos, Yuki Tsunoda has been driving the heck out of that AlphaTauri car. That AlphaTauri car is pretty much jostling with Williams as being the wooden spoon of the season. Usually with Helmut Marko, he gives AlphaTauri and Toro Rosso drivers 3 seasons in which to perform and potentially yield a further stay of execution in Formula 1. His tenacity is what's giving AlphaTauri its 2 points. Without him, they have got nothing. He's done his duty as a rookie, and so far as a team leader of AlphaTauri, he's doing a good job. He is very much outclassing his teammate, who has a lot more credentials behind him. We'll get to him later. Okay, 4th worst, again, I really don't want him to be here. Valtteri Bottas. Yes, of course. It's very good to see Valtteri Bottas really happy and really content with himself, enjoying life, embracing the Australian culture, and the mullet. I'm starting to see the Valtteri that I'm not really a keen fan of, and that's to do with the whole being anonymous in a race. On his day, Valtteri can be very good in qualifying, and if he's good in qualifying, it can usually lead a very good result in the race. But here though, I'm not really seeing that. That Alpha car is a bit of a pup at the moment, and therefore it's really not giving Valtteri the car he needs to qualify well and then pull out a solid result. Miami, he came very close. Miami's been his best race this season, but in terms of expecting Valtteri to relish the Sauber and then maybe Audi days of being the number 1 driver, he's just not putting in the results, and it's really disappointing and confusing. This is just not the Valtteri I was expecting after many years at Mercedes playing second fiddle. He can be the lead fiddle here, and he's just not showing it, and Zhou Guanyu is kind of stepping up to the plate, and surprisingly doing very well. So I'm a little bit concerned about this, but Here's hoping that Valtteri can pull his socks up. Third best driver, I would have to say it is definitely Sergio Perez. I want Sergio Perez to do well this season and really prove to Max Verstappen that he has a good and worthy opponent to go for the title. I'm pretty sure that Max Verstappen doesn't want to cakewalk to the championship with no opponent. Any racer worth his salt will want that, and I think Sergio Perez is one of the people that can give him that challenge, especially this year where he pretty much has got nothing to lose. In 2021, Checo was just glad to be in Formula 1 still after being dropped by Racing Point unexpectedly, even though he got his first win at Sakir. But now in his third season, he's pretty much got a good handle on the Red Bull, something that the other teammates of Max Verstappen recently never got. Time, and is now starting to give Max a pretty good challenge on his day. And I'm pretty sure there is going to be a flashpoint sometime this season. But in terms of overall pace and understanding of the car, Checo has pretty much got it nailed this year. He seems very solid, he seems very confident, and he's not afraid to pull his punches, something that he was kind of keen on doing in the last couple of seasons, just not to rock the boat. He wanted to be a team player to ensure that Red Bull were at the top of the table, both in the drivers and the constructors. And now that there's not really any challenger to try and actually contend against them in both of those championships, Perez can be a little bit feisty, he can be a little bit fiery, and actually step up to the plate. I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens next, and I really hope that he can improve even further. Then, third worst, Esteban Ocon. Do I really need to say much more? All of those penalties at the beginning of the season, him not really stepping up to Pierre Gasly, who's only just arrived at Alpine and so far outscoring him and being a little bit more consistent, that's really strange considering that Ocon's been around that team for now about 4 seasons. This is his 4th season at Alpine/Renault, and so far he's really not delivering what I was expecting. He's meant to be the guy who's showing Gasly the ropes, and let's not forget the whole thing in Australia where they collided. That was a flashpoint. Yes, of course, it was an accident in a really hectic restart, but it did happen. Hopefully this means it's all done and dusted and it doesn't happen again. They got it out of their system, but you never know with those two. It's a little bit uncertain. And really, Ocon's just not giving me the Esteban that I've been seeing over the last couple of years. He's been very keen to assert his own authority and attack his own teammate personally. We saw that with Sergio Perez, and we've seen that with Alonso, and I hope that we don't see that with Gasly anymore. They're meant to be trying to salvage something for Alpine, whose CEO right now is not happy with that team. There is a lot of discord at Alpine, much as there is with Ferrari. His contract is up next year, and I get the feeling that if there are more fireworks with Gasly, Ocon will be the one to go. Before we get to the best 2 drivers, I actually want to get to the second worst, and that is, unfortunately, Logan Sargeant. And I don't really like saying that because I really had high hopes for Logan. But realistically, he has been quite anonymous after his first race in Bahrain. In Bahrain, he did a very good job. But then again, Bahrain is a place where a lot of Formula 2 drivers do a lot of in-season testing, and therefore they are quite used to that track. We're starting to see the actual disconnect between himself and Albon. Yes, of course, the Williams is not a very good car, so we're not exactly expecting Sargeant to score points. We maybe see Albon score some points, but not Logan necessarily. His own home track kind of put testimony to the fact that he was nowhere. He qualified 20th and he pretty much stayed 20th, and ugh. That wasn't a good look, Logan. I really don't want to see the rumours coming true where Toto is pressuring his own buddy James Vowles to replace him with Mick Schumacher. I want to see Mick Schumacher on the grid, but not in that way. Now for the 2 best, it's a tie, and that is between Max Verstappen and Fernando Alonso. For Verstappen, there's not really much I need to say other than the fact that he's leading the championship. He pretty much commands most of the race, he doesn't have to put in too much effort, he's absolutely nailing it this year. It's pretty much similar to what we were seeing in 2022, only with much better reliability at the beginning of the season. The only couple of critiques I can actually think of is that he tends to overdrive the car when he doesn't need to. The team tell him to actually calm down for the sake of durability for later on in the season, but Max doesn't really kind of want to know that, but in a way I kind of understand, mainly for the fact that due to the whole development restrictions and the ATR regulations where they have less time to actually develop their car this year, it is going to bite them later on this season. Other teams will catch up, and then in 2024, it might be tricky for Red Bull. So Red Bull are sort of in the phase right now of just making hay while the sun shines, making the most of the time that they have where they do have an advantage, because moving forward post-Hungary and then in 2024, it might not be as easy for them. And then of course Fernando Alonso, oh boy, do I really need to say much for him as well? He's actually scored more podiums this year so far than in his 2 years at Renault in his second stint, and actually quite a few years of his Ferrari stint too. This is one of his best seasons ever in his entire 22-year history in the sport. That is phenomenal for a guy who is 42. And he's actually proving to us all that age doesn't really matter. If you've got the fire and you can keep up with the physicality and the training that you have to do in order to be a Formula 1 driver, then you can go for as long as you want. He's loving life, he's loving the team that he's got, he's the clear number one, and he's in a team which is on the up and pretty much unified and solid, whereas all the other teams aren't. I talk about it more in this video up top, by the way, if you're curious. And now this guy, I really didn't want to put him as the worst driver, but if you just look at the stats and what has been seen and what has been expected of him and what his background is, it's Nyck de Vries. I mean, come on, I really don't want this to be the case, but it's true. The guy is 28 years old, he's a Formula 2 champion, he is a Formula E champion, and yet he's putting in those kinds of performances. That ain't right. But then again, you actually take a look at his previous track records, and he does have a history of crashing into people. Pascal Wehrlein, a former Formula 1 driver for Sauber and now Formula E star, pretty much said that he didn't want to see Nyck de Vries in Formula 1, pretty much for the reasons of him colliding with de Vries on many occasions. Picking AlphaTauri, though, as your team to be in this sport, that's not a good idea, mate. Because Helmut Marko really doesn't give you the time of day, especially if you're not from the Red Bull Junior program. Because now, Nyck's got the triple header in order to prove that he's worthy to stay in AlphaTauri, or he'll be replaced by somebody else. It could be Liam Lawson, it could be Iwasa from Formula 2, it might be a cheeky Daniel Ricciardo, but that's not been confirmed yet. But could be. But needless to say, he's not getting the time in order to develop. Nikita Mazepin got more time. Nicholas Latifi got more time. And the same thing could actually be said for Logan Sargeant. He's being pressured as well. What's going on with these rookies and they're not getting a chance to do anything? That's my list, folks. I'll see you in the comments and I'll have a look at yours.